Hi, everyone. Sue Matsuki here for Nightlife Exchange with another Sue's Muse. Today, I'm spending a few minutes with a dear friend, Richard Skipper. Hi, Richard. Thank you and welcome to the show. Appreciate
Oh,
you
I'm
being here.
thrilled to be here. This is exciting.
So Richard and I go,
Congratulations. I want to say I've been watching the Sue's Views, and you have a lot of insight because you've been around a long time. And I can say that because we both have. So thank you for doing this for the community. I
well,
think
I
it's
also want to thank you because you kind of set the bar in the other part of what I'm doing in terms of the Sue's Muse and the interviewing of fellow artists and stuff. So I know for a fact that yesterday was your last Richard Skipper Celebrates interview. Tell me what that felt like and how it feels to close down something I think you've been doing for almost 7 years now with
I've been doing
everyone.
that a long time.
Yeah.
My Richard Skipper Celebrates podcast live stream, which is still available, everybody, on my YouTube channel. Uh, I started doing this just before COVID. I wanted to do a podcast, and my idea with what I wanted to do with the podcast was just going to be an audio podcast. With one of my things that I used to love were these late night radio shows. I would listen on the radio and people would call in. And that's what I wanted this to be. So just before COVID, I reached out to drop a name to Leslie Ann Warren, and I asked her if she would be my first guest, and she said yes. And so we did the interview. She was coming to New York to do Broadway Backwards, which is my favorite night of the
It
year
is.
in
It's awesome.
theater.
Yeah.
So she was coming to do that. And so I reached out to see if she would come on to talk about that. She said yes. We did the interview. Interestingly enough, after the interview was over, and I hope she doesn't mind my telling the story, she got very nervous. She asked me if I'd heard about COVID, which I had not heard about. And she said she was coming, that she was nervous about coming to New York. And I said, if you're nervous about coming to New York, you shouldn't do it. And she called the powers that be with Broadway Backwards and told them that she felt uncomfortable. They were very respectful of that. She dropped out, and the next day it was canceled. Everything started shutting down.
We were at Jennifer Pace's show that night. Remember, that's the last thing. You and I were at Jennifer Pace's show, and the next day everything shut down. I remember that
March 11th,
vividly.
and
Yep.
you and I were there together.
Yep.
And so I had a dear friend who said, you should do this as a live stream show. And then he told me about how to make an audio track out of the video track. So all of my shows that I've done visually are also available on every podcast platform out there. So I started doing this, and it became a full-time job. I was doing them almost.
I'm just sharing your page and your link
Thank
to
you.
all his videos are here, just for your information, everyone.
And there's Leslie Ann Warren when I interviewed her live when they restored Cinderella. So anyway, I started doing them almost 7 days a week. And what else were we doing? And people were tuning in and everything. And then Sue, as normally happens in this business, everybody and his brother and sister and aunt and uncle, you name it, everybody was doing a podcast.
See, I waited until you retired to do it. I'm just saying that's what a good friend does.
No, but then you get caught up in this world, as we do as artists. How many people are watching the show? How many subscribers do I have? How many this? And everybody, the numbers started to drop off. And I don't think it had anything to do with my guest. It had nothing to do with what I was putting out there. It was the fact that everybody was doing it.
Yeah.
One day I did an interview. I'm not going to mention the name. She did my show. And then I discovered that she had done another interview, literally seconds, a live interview, literally seconds before she did mine. Now, why would anybody want to sit through 3 interviews of the same person telling the same stories?
Right.
So, but I kept doing it, and every single one of them, over 1,000, every one of them were live. So it was a part of my day. Everything was leading up to that. Something that I did. I read every book of every author that was on this show.
It's true. I can vouch for that. Yeah.
From start to finish.
Yeah.
So books, were piling up on my desk. I was constantly reading. my whole day, my whole life, everything was built around this. And at the time, I thought, hopefully this will lead off to something like Sirius XM radio or something else. That was the hope. But in the back of my mind, Sue, the one thing that was missing was a live audience. And I love being on stage. So last year, Parker Nolan, thank you, Parker, asked me to kick off the first ever cabaret fest in Washington, D.C. So I started putting a show together with that, with Michael Mackesy, phenomenal. And we did the show, and I took it to Provincetown last summer, and I wanted to come back this year with a version of that show. And we'll talk in a few moments, I guess,
Right, I
about
was just gonna go
currently
there,
doing.
yeah, yeah.
But I started putting this show together. I'm working with Patrice McKinley, who is a life coach, and I recommend her. So I started working with her, and we started putting a game plan together with where I wanted to go with everything. And it was through these conversations that I had with her, not with her prompting, but it came in the back of my mind. I don't want to be the one doing the interviews anymore. I want to be the one, like now, being interviewed. And I feel that I've been around long enough. I've got a story to tell.
You do.
And so anyone out there, I want to be interviewed. So I said, that's it. I'm not going to pursue any new interviews. And then, believe it or not, even though I wasn't pursuing them, I was getting emails every single day from uh, people in the industry asking me if they could come on my show and talk about their upcoming show, their upcoming book, their upcoming product. And I started saying yes to everybody because I didn't want to let anyone down. And so my workload was not lessening, even though I was no longer pursuing it.
So let's flash forward a little bit because we're short of time because these are kind of short little interviews. How did you come to this new fabulous product that you have up and this amazing team that you're working with? James Beeman, Don Pardo, and Nathan Martin.
Nathan Martin's playing for me in London.
He's going to be playing for you. And so you come to this realization, you're going to shut down these years of interviews. You're now focused on Richard Skipper, the performer. How did this conversation happen, and how did this show happen, which debuted here in New York and now is going to Crazy Coqs in London? Congratulations on that. Tell me a little bit about this product.
Well, I again, like I said, I was going to do a variation of what I did last year in Washington and Provincetown. And I was asked to do a talk at a local library here in Rockland County on January 16th, which is the 60th anniversary of Hello, Dolly opening on Broadway. So they asked me to do that on January 16th, and I was already booked to do my show at the Laurie Beachman on my birthday, February 11th, which you were
I was
at.
there, yeah.
So that was the plan. And then so I'm having a conversation with Patrice McKinley, and she said, so the show that you're going to be doing on your birthday, how is it commercial? How are you going to get this booked in other venues around the country? And I said, I need to think about that. So I'm literally lying in bed with all these ideas running through my head. And I jumped up in bed and I said, wait a minute. It's the 60th anniversary of Hello, Dolly. Why don't I bring all of the elements together that I have learned through a lifetime in this business, put them together in this show, and see where we can go with this? So I called James Beeman. I always wanted him to direct me.
He's amazing.
So I reached out to him and I said, this is the idea. What do you think? And he said, yes, yes, yes. And I know the perfect person for you. So we reached out to Dan Pardo. Dan Pardo stepped in. And when we had our first rehearsal, which was really a meeting of the minds, I walk into a rehearsal studio. I start telling a story, and Dan Pardo, no prompting, no rehearsal, no script, sits down at the piano and starts noodling underneath. And then it was like firecrackers were going off. James would come up with an idea. Dan Pardo would come up with an idea. I would come up with an idea. And then it would like put it in a blender, and it was all coming together. And I will say all of the elements of what I wanted to do were already there.
Well, all the
It's
elements of
direct.
who you are there. You interview in the show, you have a visual media aspect, you have a historic aspect. You're referencing back to the 60th year, you're referencing back to your career and your tenure knowing, Carol Channing and other Dollies. But it's a fascinating product and it is incredibly commercial in the best possible sense, in that it's timely to celebration and it's also informative. I mean, I didn't know, I've known you for years and I didn't know half the information that I gleaned from that show that night. And, you're interviewing one-on-one in the moment with, Leroy Reams and whoever else had played Dolly. I noticed that Lorna Dallas, who played Dolly, is going to be your special guest in
She played
line.
Irene Malloy in a
Oh, did she?
production of
Okay.
Dolly.
Okay.
She was in the first production that was actually where Dolly was played by a man, and
Oh,
that's Danny LaRue in London. So it's apropos that
oh, wow.
taking the show there. But I wanted to go back for just a moment because all of those elements were there, but the structure is all James Beeman. I mean, he got me from point A to point in how we were going to move forward with this story. And I just did a show in Santa Monica with Joanne Worley and Mary Jo Catlett. And they both said to me after the show, they learned things about the production that they were in that they didn't
Amazing.
know.
Yeah.
So, and all of this is from
But you're
years.
like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to all things Dolly. So, I mean, I'm sure it was a matching of the minds, and then with the great direction and direction in terms of your show from James. So that's the process was great. You had a great time during the process.
Absolutely. And I am in love with James Beeman and Dan Pardo. And I had a rehearsal and in Dan Pardo's apartment. This was around Christmas time. And Danny, my husband, was there. Danny doesn't get emotionally involved with my shows, but Danny said he was in tears because he had never seen me in all the years that I've been doing this, getting the nurturing response that I was getting from these two men. And James Beeman and Dan Pardo, everything was about building me up. And even myself, I mean, believe it or not, we check our egos at the door.
Yeah.
We come into the rehearsal space to create alchemy. It's magic when we come together. And I can't say enough. My last director was the late, great Jay Rogers,
Yes.
who I miss daily.
Yeah, we all do.
And he took me to levels that I had never been at before. So if you're going to do this, folks, find the right director.
All right, so we're kind of getting ready to close down. I just wanted to ask you, and I'm going to bring you back and do another little interview on marketing and branding because there's so much I want to ask you about that. So watch for that in the Sue's Views section of Sue's Muse. But for now, what was some of the best advice you got in terms of this business, and who was it from?
Well, I will go with the lady herself, and that's Carol Channing.
Oh.
Carol Channing once told me that for every person in this business who likes you, there are an equal number who don't. Focus on what you bring to the table. All of us as artists, we bring what we bring to the table. And I just read a quote just before we went live, and it said, the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves against envy is to do great work. Wow. And when you're putting great work out there, hopefully the audience is going to show up. It's going to resonate with people. And what you do, Sue, nobody else can touch. Nobody. And, I was watching something the other night, and it was about Ethel Merman. And they said that when Ethel Merman died, Walter Kerr said, you can be replaced. I can be replaced. She will never be replaced. And I feel that about artists in general, because each artist brings what we bring to the table. There will be people who will try to copy what you do because they're going to steal from the best. Real artists steal from others. It's true. But don't let that get to you, because if you do, it's going to stop you in your tracks. Just go out and do the best work you can do and just hope for the best.
Well, that goes along with closing shop here. That goes along with advice I received from you, and many of us who know you have heard this. Stay in your own lane. Focus on you, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Richard, for joining us. I'm going to do a second part with you, so you'll stay with me for a little bit. Thank you all for joining us for today's Sue's Muse with a wonderful moment with the one and only Richard Skipper. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
I don't know why it's not. I'll have to edit this. Oh, God. Richard, I don't think any of that recorded.
Are you serious?